First of all, thanks to Prem for his kind words and to Cafe Mutual for giving this honor to me and to Edelweiss. Good to see all of you out here. This is a very interesting time to speak about wealth creation and wealth management because I do believe that, as Prem said, we have to make trade offs, we have to balance the interest of various constituents. But we should also remember that we are in a very interesting stage in India's evolution, and that stage is where the real compounding of India's growth has now started. And what we mean by compounding, all of you are in investing and in wealth management. So obviously we all know the power of compounding and how the longer the horizon, the last few years make real difference to the wealth. In India, we became a $1 trillion GDP country in US dollar terms, absolute dollars, US $1 trillion in 2007. In 2014-15, about 7.5 years after that, India became a $2 trillion GDP country, which means we added $1 trillion in the first 60 years of our existence as a country to our economy. And in the 7.5 years after that, we have added another $1 trillion to India's GDP. And all this is in absolute terms, in spite of the rupee falling and all of that. Our estimate is that India will add another 1 trillion in the next 5 years, then another 1 trillion in the next 3 years, and then another 1 trillion in the next 2 years after that. Which means by 2025, India should be a $5 trillion GDP country. And there are only 3 other countries in this world which are crossed $5 trillion up till now. That is USA, China, and Japan. And India will be the 4th country in 2025 when we cross that. And hence, I do consider the next 10 years and 20 years is a historic opportunity because India's age of compounding has started. And the age of compounding is so phenomenal that after 2025, we're going to add $1 trillion to our GDP every 18 months after that. So what we added for 60 years until 2007 is going to be added after 2025 in 18 months. This is obviously a historic opportunity. And the reason this is important is because everything else, the size of the savings pool, the wealth creation, the market cap, all of that are ultimately linked to the GDP size. And India has historically been between 50% to 80% of our GDP has been the market cap of India. And our estimate is that given the way India is evolving, the norm should be between 75% to 100% of the GDP, which means that by the time India becomes a $5 trillion country, having a market cap between $4 to $5 trillion is also not unthinkable, which should be about 3x from now in US dollar terms and close to 5x from now in Indian rupee terms. So given that this real age of compounding has started, how do we really benefit out of that? And as this $5 trillion happens for India, there is going to be a creation of a lot of wealth. And we have seen that from 2007 to 2015, there has been a lot of creation of wealth. And all of you have helped grow that wealth, manage that wealth. And I think the same is going to continue as we go along. How do we make sure that the various interests of the promoters, the investors, the advisors are fairly balanced in that? Because the pie itself is growing, but we have to make sure that the share of the pie also gets split in a very fair way. But in a way, it's easier because the pie itself is growing. Because if the pie were not growing, then sharing the pie becomes a lot harder. While if it's a growing pie, then we can go through the evolutionary pangs of saying, okay, a little bit here, a little bit there. And what we have seen in the mutual fund industry, in the wealth management industry in the last few years, is actually something similar to that, where the economics for every participant in the chain has undergone a change. And the other reason for this evolution being very important for us is that India still continues to be a country of savers. We save a lot. Our current savings is about 30% of our GDP, which means on a $2 trillion GDP, our savings is about $600 billion, which is a large sum. Consider the fact that the total FII investment in India is close to 20 to 30 billion dollars a year, while we save 600 billion dollars of our own money every year, which means our own savings are more than 30 times the average FI investment in India. And still the FIIs control the market, because when they enter the market goes up. When they exit the market comes down. Though fortunately, the Indian institutions like the mutual funds and the insurance companies are now becoming a very strong counterbalancing force to that. But the larger paradox in India is that we are a country of savers, but not yet a country of investors. And I think all of us together over the next 10 years will help in this transformation that is going to happen from saving to investing. Earlier in the morning, we were talking about how the earlier generation saw FDs as a way of putting their savings to work, while now it is starting to become SIP. And it is not just from savings in an FD to an SIP. I think it is also from savings to investment is the transformation that is going on. And on a long-term basis, India does need to convert our own savings into investments, because when we do that, the impact of FIIs, the impact of any global changes will be so much smaller to us because of the large pool of savings we have. If we can maintain a 30% savings rate and the economy becomes a $5 trillion GDP, 30% of that will be $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion will have to be saved, will have to be invested in so many instruments across, from real estate to mutual funds to insurance to stock market to all other avenues which are there. And it's going to be very, very exciting. But I think this shift from a savings country to an investing country is going to be very, very exciting for all of us. The other key challenge that goes on is all savers all around the world want to keep their savings in as short term an instrument as possible. All savers want immediate access to their funds. That's all over the world, and that has been the historic paradox of the financial services industry. The savers want to keep their money on the short end, while the people who can use the money, the users of capital, want to keep they want the money for the long term. If you're buying a house, you want a 20-year loan, you want a 10-year loan. But the same when you're putting your money in the bank in an FD or in the mutual fund, you want overnight liquidity on that. So as savers, we want liquidity immediately available to us. But as users of capital, we want as long-term capital as available. And the whole financial industry, whether it's banking, whether it's mutual fund, whether it's insurance companies, this is another key paradox that we have to manage, is this entire trade-off between the short end of the savers and the long end of the users of capital. And the entire fractional reserve banking that has started has actually come about on this basis only, the entire management of what is called the ALM. And even in the mutual fund, we have seen that. We have seen some of the bond funds, some of the liquid funds in 2008 had liquidity issues, because that entire hypothesis about the fractional reserve system breaks down in a crisis. And hence this, how do we balance the short end and the long end, is going to be another interesting shift that is going to evolve as we go along. Along with that, there is going to be another paradox that is going to be there, and that has been always there in India, is the short end and the long end. India, there is a lot of noise in the short end. India is a highly noisy country. We look at the channels on TV, the newspapers we read, there is a constant amount of noise on beef, on intolerance, on this, on that, on education policy, on every step of RBI, every step of government, every pronouncement by any small minister anywhere is headline news for all of us. And given this huge preponderance of the noise, we sometimes tend to lose the long-term opportunity in India. And this constant balance between the short-term noise that overwhelms all of us, that overpowers all of us, and the long-term opportunity, and keeping that bifocal attention of short-term noise and the long-term opportunity is also one of the paradoxes we have to manage as we go along. I remember in my experience of the last 27 years in the financial services industry, there has never been one quarter, there has never been one quarter where things were going good for India, that there were no concerns, that there was no noise on some change in SEBI or in government regulations. I remember in 1994 when SEBI was formed, the brokers on the Bombay Stock Exchange went on a strike against the formation of SEBI. So India has a lot of this short-term noise which are there. So over the last 27 years, I have seen short-term noise all the time. But when I step back now and reflect onto that, the index is up 35x in those 27 years. The economy has gone from $200 billion to $2 trillion in US dollar terms, where the US dollar has also gone from 18 rupees to 68 rupees now. And in spite of that, the economy is now grown from 200 billion 27 years ago to $2 trillion now. So the idea is to see India as an evolutionary opportunity, as an opportunity that evolves over a period of time, and keep this long-term perspective in mind. All of you are involved in investing for the long term, so it's not something new I'm saying to you. And as I always say, India is a great movie to watch, but is a horrible snapshot to see at any point of time, because at any point of time, there are so many concerns and challenges, whether it is rainfall, whether it is economic slowdown, whether it is some other crisis going on, whether the RBI governor will continue or not. Those kind of things will always continue. But if you see India over a long term, as the movie that unfolds in front of us, it looks very, 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 very exciting. The other challenge we have is obviously how the entire mutual fund industry evolves, how SEBI can manage it. And I think over a period of time, I have seen that having a good regulator, whether it's SEBI, RBI, IRDA, all of them eventually add a lot of value to the growth of the industry in the long term. In the short term, a lot of rules that they frame can be inconveniences as we go along. But again, you have to trade off the short term with the long term. And I do believe that we in Edelweiss, we came to birth in 1996, which was 2 years after SEBI was formed. And I do believe that a company like Edelweiss got created without any legacy advantage, without any other advantage, only because the Indian capital market got fairly well regulated after the formation of SEBI. I'm sure they have done good things. So they have done some inconvenient things, but on the whole, if you see the history, a well-regulated market is any time a lot more desirable than a completely cowboy or an old boys club market that has been there. We're seeing the same thing in the NBFC sector. To give you an idea, in the NBFC sector, before 2005, if you wanted to start an NBFC and you wanted to be a large NBFC, it was almost impossible unless you are an industrial group. So if you look at most of the large NBFCs in India, the Tata, Birla, Mahindra, Bajaj, all of them are all industrial houses. Because to be an NBFC, to get capital from banks, to get resources from banks, you had to show who your sponsor is, who is your promoter. But all this changed after 2005. Now we are seeing new NBFCs getting formed all the time. We have now small finance banks that have come about. We have the microfinance companies. Our own NBFC has grown from zero in 2005 to now almost 21,000 crores of assets in the credit business, which would have been unthinkable in 2005. As a non-industrial group backed company, to have a credit book of this size and scale was almost unthinkable at that time. At that time, honestly, we thought if we can get to a couple of thousand crores, it will be a great achievement. And we started our NBFC business in 2005, and it was in 2010 that we got the first bank loan from a bank. So between 5 to 10, we had to use our own equity and some borrowings from the mutual funds to build a credit book. And only when we got a credit book of almost about 1800 crores is when we were able to go to the banks, and we got our first credit line of 40 crores from Andhra Bank at that point of time. So it has been historically very hard for the new age companies to come about. But I think in the last 20 years, all this has changed. It has changed in the mutual fund industry, it has changed in capital markets, it has changed in the NBFC sector. And hence, I do believe that whatever inconvenience or complications that come about because of change in regulations, on a long-term basis, a lot of this is good for the health of the industry and the growth of the industry. Obviously, there is a huge problem in financial services in terms of how do we regulate it. And when I talk to RBI and SEBI and all, one of the common concerns that has been there is this whole conflict between the financial services products which are bought and the financial services products which are sold. So if you see something like a savings bank account or a FD in a bank or even a credit card, these are bought. You don't have to sell very hard to somebody to form an FD in the bank. There is not much intervention required because these products are naturally bought. When somebody has savings, he has to put them somewhere. But against that, there are also financial services products which are sold, like for example, brokerage accounts, mutual funds, insurance products. All these are sold. And when there is selling, there is also advice that has to go along with selling. And this entire conundrum between what should be the regulation for the bought products and what should be the regulation for the sold and advised products is where there is a lot of regulatory ambiguity that we are currently seeing, because the moment you have to advise and sell, there is a cost involved in that, and that cost cannot be the same as the cost as compared to a product that is automatically bought. And hence the commissions, the fees, the entire structure has to evolve keeping this in mind. Also, this conflict between growth and regulation, because every regulator, RBI, SEBI, IRDA, has this constant conflict between how much should they promote growth and how much should they regulate the investor's interest. And this is also very similar to what we face in companies, because I have seen with a lot of companies, every company that starts, it starts with a lot of idealism. You cannot start a company, you can't be an entrepreneur without a lot of idealism. But then after you start, you also have to balance that idealism with a lot of pragmatism. I'm sure quite a few of you have experienced that. And this constant challenge between the idealism of a startup and a pragmatism of a going concern is what also creates this always ongoing conflict. And I've seen that as companies grow up, as they become fairly big, either they lose the idealism or they lose the pragmatism, and they are both equally bad, because if you lose your idealism, then you become very pragmatic, then you lose your soul, then you don't have that original soul that you had when you started the company. But also if you become too idealistic and are not aware of the real challenges in the real world, then it will be hard to survive and scale up. So this constant balance between idealism and pragmatism, and I've seen great companies which become much older have been constantly able to manage this idealism, pragmatism. We in Edelweiss have always struggled with it, and we have our guiding principles and other stuff to constantly remind us of the idealism that we had when we started the company. And if you have some processes like that, if you constantly go back to the original idealism, then come back to pragmatism, I think you can keep this ongoing balance in this world alive. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about balance, we talk about conflict, because any balance is about conflict, is about trade-offs. And like in the mutual fund advisory business or the wealth management business, one of the biggest questions a lot of people have asked me is, are we chemists or are we doctors? Which means, in other words, if somebody came to you and said, I want to buy sleeping pills, and would you just, without asking any questions, be happy to sell the sleeping pills to that person, or will you investigate whether the person has a proper prescription, has a need for the sleeping pills or not? And the constant question is, should we act like chemists or should we act like doctors? Are we in charge of the financial health and the well-being of our clients? And at least our answer always has been that there is no easy answer to this, but if you have to find an answer, you have to be closer to a doctor in this. You have to be closer to the custodian of the financial well-being, the financial health of your clients. But it means that you also have to charge higher fees. You need to be so much involved because you need to put in a lot more effort, a lot more responsibility as you go along. And hence this entire commission issue that all of us have been grappling with, because if you think the advisors and the wealth managers are closer to doctors, then the fee and commission structure will also per se have to be closer to that. So this kind of a conflict is what we are all currently grappling with. It's not going to end. I think it will go on, and the only way is you find a finer and final balance. You get more sophisticated balance in that, because at the end of the day, this conflict drives every aspect of our existence, whether it's inhaling versus exhaling, whether it's standing on one foot versus the other. You have to balance all the time. I always say that, can you stand on only one foot at a time? You can, but for how long? After a few minutes, you have to also shift your weight to the other foot. So constant balancing of going from one foot to the other is what is going to be ongoing challenge for our industry as we go along. And the idea of how do you manage it? The idea of really managing this is by building comfort and trust amongst various constituents out there. One of the things we have lost in India is this trust that has to be there, because we have lost that, and that's why we use the word scam all the time, because everybody feels that everything else is a scam. Everybody feels everybody else is doing something wrong, and either cheating somebody or making some illegal gains. And we have to break that culture. We have to create a culture where there is inherent trust amongst all the participants, whether it is the sector regulator, the participants, the investors, the advisors, all of that. And the way to instill trust is through constant communication and interaction. Constant interaction amongst the constituents, the arguments, the going back and forth, seeing each point, each angle out there is the only way you can build trust. It's an endless process. It goes on and on. It happens in organizations also. But in Edelweiss also, we always strongly believe that the only way to build trust is through constant dialogue, communication, interaction, conversation all the time, because when that breaks down, you can be assured that things will get worse. When there is no trust, when there is that constant adversarialness in every interaction, it's very hard to create the win-win situations. And this conflict, as I say, like in Edelweiss, we call that being an accelerator and a brake, because if I gave you a car and said it has a great accelerator but no brake, would you be happy with that car? And if I give you a car saying it has a great brake but no accelerator, would you be happy with that? What you ideally need is a car with a good brake and a good accelerator. In fact, I also say that if there is a good brake, then you can actually use the accelerator a lot more aggressively. And in Edelweiss, our slogan also, ideas create, values protect, has also come about on that. We think ideas are the accelerator, but values are the brakes, and it is the values that will protect us and the ideas that will take us forward. And constantly having this conversation about the balance, about these conflicts that are there inherent in our existence, is a good way of finding answers to that. Also, this constant communication, interaction should result in an environment of more transparency, fairness, a more level playing field. I do believe that in the last 20 years, India has evolved a lot. It has become a lot more level playing field. There is this whole angle of incumbency that I spoke about earlier. We still have incumbency. We have incumbency in politics, in movies, in everywhere else. If your father is an actor, it's easier for you to be an actor. But I do believe that this incumbency is getting broken down. What we have seen in the last 20 years, and if I extrapolate that for the next 20 years, I think we are seeing a new India, where the old rules, the old incumbency advantages are being broken down slowly and surely, and it is creating a lot of opportunity for all of us as we go along. So along with that, I just want to say that this question that we have about finding the balance is an eternal quest. It's not going to go away, but interactions like even forums like these forums will help us arrive at the answers to that, will help us grapple with these issues and find hopefully a win-win for everybody, for the investors, for the advisors and wealth management industry, and for the society at large. So along with that, again, thank you very much for this great honor, and I do hope that you all have a great day grappling with all these issues, and it's going to be an exciting whole day for all of you. Thank you.
That was a brilliant presentation. I wanted to ask you something. I want to congratulate actually Edelweiss for sponsoring the Indian Olympic contingent. So what was that driven by? Was it driven by pragmatism or idealism?
Actually, a combination of both.
Okay, great.
We strongly believe that I think a lot of Indian athletes, they need encouragement and support. So historically, we have also supported OGQ, which is Olympic Gold Quest. We've been one of the corporates, partners with them. From 2008 onwards, we have supported Saina Nehwal, Madicom, and all of them. Because I do believe that outside of cricket, it's very hard for athletes to get support, financial and otherwise. So I think that is the idealism part. I do believe the Indian Olympic team, whatever help and support they can get is going to be great for them. For example, we have given 1 crore rupees of insurance to each of the athlete in the contingent. And it is the first time a lot of them have ever got any insurance in their lives. So it's actually very exciting and gratifying to see that, but that's the idealism part. The pragmatism part is we also do believe when everybody is trying to spend money on IPL and there is so much clutter and so much, cricket overdose out there, trying to find something that is non-cricket but still appeals to Indians and our target audience, our investors, our customers. We thought Olympics was a good way. And it helped us a lot because the kind of customer responses we have got on this has been enormous. So it has obviously helped our brand. It has helped our, entire connect with the customers. So there is also the pragmatism, practical part of it. So the idea is to try and balance the both. And I thought in this example that you have cited, we were fortunate enough to find that balance, that we could find a pragmatic angle and the idealistic angle.
I'd like to thank Rashesh on behalf of our audience here for sharing his thought-provoking ideas. And I'd like to call Prem back on stage to felicitate him with a small token of appreciation. Prem. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd also like to invite Abhizer Divanji on stage to join Prem and Rashesh to unveil the EY report on wealth management for the year.